Dobro. Mi ćemo sad, ti samo pusti snimanje, a mi ćemo se, još se moram dogovoriti, malo nismo stigli. We didn't have time to talk about how shall we construct this interview.
Yeah, well, we'll just let it flow.
Yeah,
it usually works out pretty good.
Okay, so please introduce yourself, your name, what are you doing in Croatia, and we'll start with that.
Well, my name is Rick Simpson, and I've been in Europe for the last 16 months spreading the word about the wonderful healing properties of the hemp plant, cannabis hemp, also known as marijuana, and it's been outlawed by our governments strictly really for reasons that big companies can make more profit. Mm-hmm. Hemp is harmless. No one has ever died from the use of hemp medicine. It's man's oldest known and safest medication. And it can literally work miracles for all types of diseases: cancers, diabetes, arthritis, multiple sclerosis. Many of these so-called incurable diseases can be cured with the use of this essential oil made from the hemp plant itself, mm-hmm. not the seed oil, the oil made right from the plant itself. But today, the world we're living in, with these nuclear disasters we've just had in Japan and plus Chernobyl, we have radiation problems all over this planet. And I've treated many people that had, gone through radiation treatments for cancer. And I've seen the damage that it leaves behind. But when they use this oil, like when they took a full 60-gram treatment to treat their cancer, and usually it takes about 90 days for them to complete the treatment, mm-hmm. but at the end of 90 days, the radiation damage is gone. So countries like Japan could really benefit. The people could really benefit if they were taking this oil, because it would reduce the radiation danger, a great deal. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're insane not to be using this plant, in the proper way, because it's not just a medicine. It's a food source. It's an energy source. It puts people back on the land where they can be back in touch with nature again and not at the mercy of the system. We can be more self-sufficient. We can grow our own energy. We can grow our own food. We can grow our own medicine. And for the human race to progress and evolve in the proper way, we have to have this plant made legal for everyone to grow and possess again.
Yeah, it's interesting that it is banned for so many years, especially because of all these uses you can mm-hmm. have. It's not about high, so we have to say that it's not about getting high. It's about so many other things, and especially oil, and this essential oil you use. Can you tell us your story about you were very sick at the time? You had skin cancer,
right.
Didn't you? And can you tell us how was that gone with essential oil?
Well, the essential oil from this plant I cured my own cancer over 8 years ago, mm-hmm. With the use of this oil. But what had happened with me, my cousin, my 25-year-old cousin, had died in 1972 from cancer, and I was about 23 at the time. And cancer was very rare at that time. Matter of fact, my cousin was the first person I ever knew that died from cancer. So, it's just these last few decades that we've got all this cancer. But it was about 2 years after he had passed away, and he died a horrible death, because he went from about 200 pounds down to about 50 pounds when he died. He just faded away. He was just bones when he died. And about 2 years later, I worked in a hospital, and I was leaving the hospital one day, and this announcement came on the radio. This report just in, a medical study in the United States has proven that THC, the natural ingredient in the marijuana plant, has been found to kill cancer cells. Mm-hmm. But the announcer was laughing like a fool. Of course, every time they use the word marijuana, they got to try to make a joke out of it. But when I first heard the report, I thought, this can't be true. But, and time went on, I never heard nothing more about it. So I just thought it was somebody's idea of a joke. But it stayed in my memory. So in 1997, I was badly injured, had a bad head injury at work. And they put me on chemicals and pills, and nothing helped. And finally, it was about a year after my injury that I watched an episode of The Nature of Things with Dr. David Suzuki. It was a very popular science and news program in Canada. Mm-hmm. And it was called Reefer Madness 2. And it showed all of these patients smoking pot to help with their conditions. And it did help. So I went out and I got some hemp, and I call it hemp rather than marijuana, because it really is the hemp plant. And so I got some and I tried it. And it worked better than anything the doctors were giving me. And my problem was, see, I have ringing in my head 24 hours a day from the injury, and it drives my blood pressure crazy. So it's a very hard thing to live with. But by smoking hemp, that did help me sleep better. But I needed something even stronger. So then in 1999, I went to my doctor's office one day, and they wouldn't give me a prescription for this, even though they knew it was the only thing that helped me. So I mentioned to the doctor, I said, what would you think if I took that plant and I produced the essential oil from the plant and ingested it, as opposed to smoking it? And he said that would be a much more medicinal way to use the substance. But still, he wouldn't give me a prescription. So in 2001, the medical system, basically, they called me in one day and they said, there's nothing more we can do. We've tried all our chemicals. Nothing helps you. So you're on your own. But again, wouldn't give me a prescription, so that made me an automatic criminal. You know, if I needed the hemp as a medicine, but I couldn't get it legally. So I didn't have any choice, so I started using the oil. Now, back in the early 1990s, I had developed these areas on my body. I had one by my eye, and I had one on my cheek, and I had one on my chest. And they wouldn't heal. They just kept swelling up and bleeding, and it felt like I had splinters in my face in that area. And I thought at the time, I figured it was cancer, but nobody wants to hear that word. So I had put off even mentioning it to the doctor. But in 2002, these areas, they weren't going away. So one day I was in my doctor's office and I mentioned it to him, and he looked at them and he said, well, it looks like skin cancer. So they took me in, and the one next to my eye was the one they worked on first because it was so close to the eye, they were worried. And then they said they would bring me back at a later date to do the other two areas. So it was about a week after they had performed the surgery on my eye that I was looking at where they had done the work one night, and that report I'd heard from the 1970s popped back into my head. And I was making the oil and using it, ingesting it to help me sleep, which it certainly did. It did help me a great deal. But I thought, well, this is oil, hemp oil. It's full of THC. What would happen if I took that oil and put it directly on the cancer and then just covered it with a bandage? And I have to admit that I almost didn't do it, because I was thinking, well, I was already taking the oil, and I was thinking, if this cured cancer, then my cancer should be gone. But the truth is, the skin is the largest organ on our bodies. And I was taking enough oil that the cancer really couldn't get in, but it was staying alive on the surface. So the minute I put this oil on, within 4 days, the other two areas I did, 4 days later when I removed the bandages, there was just pink skin left. And then I started telling people, this oil cured my cancer. And everybody just laughed at me. They thought, I'm not the type of guy you laugh at. And I'm very serious when it comes to something like this. But everyone just laughed at me, like marijuana cures cancer, you're crazy. And so I was starting to doubt it, because I was really the first person I had ever treated was myself. But within 7 weeks, the cancer they had surgically removed by my eye, it came right back. And when it did, I watched it develop, that same splinters and the bleeding. And I thought, well, here's a perfect time, perfect way to prove it. So I put the oil on it. 4 days later, took the bandage off. That was over 8 years ago. I've never had to retreat them since. I went to my doctor's office and asked them for a copy of the pathology report from the operation. And right in the pathology report, it stated I had basal cell carcinoma, skin cancer. And so I wanted to talk to the doctor about what I had done. So I asked his secretary, who happened to be his wife, I told her, I said, I'd like to come back in the evening and have a talk to the doctor about something I'm working on. And she looked at me very strangely, and she said, well, what's this about? And I told her, I said, those 3 areas of skin cancer, I said, the one by my eye that was surgically removed, it came back in a matter of weeks. So I used hemp oil to cure it and the other 2 skin cancers. And the minute I said hemp oil, the woman went rigid. You could just see her go rigid. And there was people in the waiting room, 5 or 6 people in the doctor's waiting room, and she literally started screaming at me. The doctor will not go there. The doctor will not prescribe this. And I'm thinking, I cured my cancer with this natural oil, and the doctor doesn't want to hear about it? Now, what's wrong with this picture? And after that, I just went on, I went on a campaign to bring it to the attention of everyone. I went to the Canadian Cancer Society. I went to all the political parties. I went to 2 federal ministers of health over this. We went to Dr. Suzuki, other well-known shows in Canada like W5, The Fifth Estate, Marketplace. We went to all of these shows, Canadian Cancer Society. We even went to the United Nations about this. Nobody would lift a finger.
Interesting that actually in the 19th century, hemp was almost it was ingredient in almost all the products. The world was actually, now it's on oil. It was based on hemp products. People don't know that. When things started to be to be demonized, so to speak, when hemp started to be outlawed, so to say.
You're absolutely right about the medicinal use. Up until about 1900, half the medicine produced on this planet came from the hemp plant. But you see, I told people right from the beginning, the drug companies in the mid 1850s, they started, they were producing the essential oils from many different medicinal herbs and plants, and then they would sell these oils to the public as a medicine. But hemp was known all through history to be the most medicinal plant on earth. So of course they would produce the essential oil from that plant. But through all the research we've done, I've never been able to find any drug company that ever sold the real essential oil from the plant to the public. What they did, they sold watered-down versions of hemp medicine. The hemp oil mixed with alcohol, and they sold it as tinctures. Eli Lilly sold hash pills in the 1880s as painkillers. But again, they always controlled the potency. So I'm totally convinced that the pharmaceutical industry has known since, I'd say, around 1850. For the last 150, 160 years, they've known how to cure cancer and practically all other diseases, because they would have made the essential oil, and when they passed that out to their doctors to test it, then the doctors would have come back and said, well, this stuff cures everything, which is exactly what I found. And I think that they were just terrified of this, because in those days...
No profit.
No profit. And if those farmers who were all freely growing this found out that they were growing the greatest miracle drug in the world right in their backyard, the drug companies would be out of business. So then in the 1880s, the drug companies got together and they started combining these different chemical mixtures. Well, that they could patent. See, they couldn't patent the plant, but they could patent a chemical mixture. Well, once they started patenting the chemicals, they wanted hemp gone. So in Canada, in 1923, the Canadian government made it illegal for hemp to be used in medicine. And then the same thing happened in the States in 1937. And it was really the big money concerns, like the cotton industry, the energy company, oil companies. They were terrified of this because of its ability to make alcohol to power our cars and things. And, practically all of the big chemical companies, all the big money interests were against the hemp plant. So that's the reason it was outlawed. But I think really the pharmaceutical industry is the most guilty, because they had sold hemp-based medicines, like Parker Davis, Eli Lilly, Squibb, all of those big companies we have today. Back in the 1800s, they were all selling hemp-based medicines. But today, they'll tell us, like, we don't know anything about hemp. It needs more research. It's all a lie.
Hemp was used all over the human society, so to speak, also. And you said that it was... they paid taxes with
Yes.
plants when also 19th century.
Well, in the 1600s, they passed laws that in the New World or in North America, that if you were a farmer, you had to grow hemp, because they needed it to make the canvas and the ropes and the paper. Everything they used in those days they were making it from hemp. So they actually had laws in place that you had to grow it. And actually, farmers did pay their taxes with some of their hemp crops, and that went on for many, many years. But it's like I said, when the time come that the big money interests wanted it gone, then the governments don't really run our countries. It's the big money in the background. The governments really are just puppets. But I always tell people, I said, look, as mad as I get